Are those your plants in the background?
No, as I told the students in the morning class, I rented those to make it look, it's like $6 a plant. So I rented them to make it look like I'm in an actual house. In fact, most of them are just made out of plastic. They're props. You see right there. And can you see a blue thing there? That's not a bus either. That only looks like a bus. It's a prop to make it look like that's an actual street out there. That car is digital, for example. You can download that. It's like a supplement for your Zoom. You can just add that into any background. Now, do you have any financial crisis these days?
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to get a resilient job, the kind of job that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Well, I'm working like an idiot. I spent, 7 hours editing the first video for my biology class, and maybe 8 hours editing this thing for
Why?
Many of us do crazy things because this thing, Zoom, it gives me a link that I could just send you all to see the recorded video. I could do that. Instead, I spend hours trying to figure out iMovie with no memory, trying to edit something so I can post it on YouTube and then get 1 million fans.
Is there not like a...
So for example, in the other one, when we started talking, every time one of you spoke, the camera went to you, even if you had a black background. So then I had to somehow block that, so that even if you were talking for 2 seconds, I would block it with a black screen, or I would do some trick so that you couldn't be seen. And so there were a bunch of stupid things like that I had to do, but I don't know. I think my hope is that if I start recording this stuff, I can get a little bit good at it, and then I can just post videos like a normal person. Because that's what normal people do now. They just post their videos.
Right.
What's the point? I mean, what's the point of having these $6 plants back there if I can't look at them? Like, you know, I made an effort so that you would have kind of a window out there so that you don't just have a plain wall. I put on my jacket, I made an effort. So it feels sloppy to then just share a Zoom link. It feels very sloppy. I think people who get good at it, they just set it up right and then they just start talking and then they hit share and it all works. Not with me yet. Anyhow, any final announcements before we get going and I mute you all? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, 0.05, several messages. Charles studied abroad, video editor with cheap quarantine rate. We signed away our image rights while participating in UT events. These classes count for. Charles, I might have to contact you for your editing expertise. All right, let's get going. And I now go to something called mute all and let's get started. I'll try not to go over. I'll try to just talk for 40 minutes and then we'll talk. All right, so hi all, I'm glad you're here. Let's see if we can get things going. Sorry it's kind of dark, but the outside is pretty bright, at least in the video camera, so you got some light there. So I want to tell you a couple of stories before we talk about the readings. The first one is about an Italian immigrant who stole a lot of money from a lot of people, and his name was Charles Ponzi. He gives the name to what's known now as a Ponzi scheme. Big time, classic thief. So born in 1882, he was a short guy, 5 foot 2 inches, and somehow he made millions of dollars in just several months by persuading tens of thousands of people to give him money. In 1903, he gets off of a ship, the SS Vancouver in Boston Harbor, and he has very little money. Allegedly, he had around $2.50 in his pocket, and he's trying to come up with ways to make money, to make some sort of a business for himself. He thought it would be a good idea, since he came from Europe, to set up some sort of an international trade journal where people from the US could read about things that are going on in Europe. And he goes to a bank. He tries to get a loan for $2,000. This is in Massachusetts. He goes to a bank called Hanover Trust Company. They evaluate his credit, and they deny him that loan. He wants to make the magazine. He wants to make money off of advertising, but now he has a gripe against this bank. Eventually, he gets a letter from a Spanish guy that is asking him about some things, and he notices the letter has a stamp. The stamp is for 30 centavos, which is similar to 30 cents. But Ponzi knew that the exchange rate between currency in Spain and currency in the US had changed. So now, instead of getting 30 centavos for 5 cents, that is for 1 nickel, you could get 32 centavos for 1 nickel. So it makes him think, it used to be that you would get 30 centavos for 5 cents. What if I somehow could buy stamps in Spain, these mail stamps, and then sell them in the US? Couldn't I make a profit? So he comes up with this idea. Suppose that we're in Spain, and in Spain we use 30 centavos to buy 1 30-cent stamp. Now we mail the 30-cent stamp to the US. Once we have the 30-cent stamp in the US, we can trade it for the equivalent, which used to be 5 cents. So now we sell the 30 centavo stamp for 1 nickel. And now that we have 1 nickel, we trade that nickel for Spanish centavos. Now there's going to be a fee. Suppose the fee is 1. You trade the 1 nickel for Spanish centavos. They do a 1 centavo fee, and you end up getting 31 centavos. That is, now you have more money than you started with, because you started with 30 centavos and that you did this shipping process for the stamp, and now you have a scheme for making this is it's kind of interesting, because had it been 1 centavo out of 10 centavos, that would have been a 10% profit. So it's less than that. So now the idea, instead of doing it with a single stamp, suppose we could do this with thousands of stamps. Thousands of Spanish stamps are shipped to the US. We sell them for cash, and then we exchange that cash for Spanish currency. We pay the fee and we make a profit. It's a good enough idea, he thinks, that he founds a company, and he gives a name to this company. He calls it the Securities Exchange Company. He could have called it the Stamp Trade Company, but he just calls it securities. Again, if you want to steal money from someone, you might as well call your product a security. That way, I don't know, they feel cozy, they feel safe. Like one of the Charlie Brown characters, Linus Van Pelt, he had a security blanket. So he felt all cozy and safe. We sell you that same word, and we say, we're exchanging securities, and you feel good in giving us your money. And the scheme, what he says he's going to do with this company is take advantage of these monetary trade differences. If in one country the currency has a value that changes, but at the same time they have paper products like stamps that have a flat rate, that does not change at the same time, then maybe we can make a profit by selling these paper products. So he promises investors that if they give him money in just 90 days, they're going to get back 50% more than what they gave him. So you give him $100, in 3 months, he's going to give you $150. And it works. People give him money and they find out that sure enough, in 3 months, he gives them more money than they gave him. He starts recruiting sales agents to do this also, to distribute these profits and make these exchanges. He gets thousands of people as clients. Eventually, he's got 40,000. Once he's got enough money and enough clients, he decides to buy the bank that had rejected his request for a loan, the Hanover Trust Company. And only a year has gone by. One of his employees, a guy who's his publicity agent, rats on him. Says, hey, this is what the guy's doing. He's not buying any stamps. He's not making any trades. He's not converting centavos to cents. All he's doing is he's taking your money. You give him $100 and he gives it to other people that gave him their money weeks ago. So because he's getting more and more customers, he can always give the new money to the people that gave him money earlier and make the people who gave him money earlier rich, or not rich, you know, they just make a big profit. And then they're very impressed and they want to give him even more money. So his publicity agent says, look, this guy is $2 million in debt. He owes interest too. If he pays these interests that he has promised, he would be more than $4 million in debt. And Ponzi defends himself, says it's all a lie. He threatens to sue a newspaper, the Boston Post, that had actually tried to expose him as a con man. He says he's actually doing business directly with foreign banks. It's just BS. He's not doing anything. The Chicago Tribune newspaper publishes a story titled Ponzi has figured out the secret of alchemy. It says Ponzi reveals the philosopher's stone. 0 plus 0 is equal to dollars. Government auditor gets involved. He finds out that Ponzi is in debt for, he says $3 million. It was really around 7 million. And Ponzi gets, he gets arrested. So in the process of Ponzi getting arrested, meanwhile, it turns out that this Hanover Trust Bank that I mentioned had monies that were involved in the Ponzi scheme. Basically, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had put more than $100,000 in this bank that were involved in the Ponzi scheme. So by September 1920, the treasurer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts resigns, and Ponzi is in trouble. An audit reveals that all that Mr. Charles Ponzi actually had was just $61 worth of coupons, even though he had gone through millions of dollars from investors and apparent profits. 1920, he's convicted of fraud. He pays bail. It's an interesting concept. Everyone is assumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. However, if you're poor, you do have to go to jail to wait for your trial. If you're rich, if you have money, then you get to be treated as really innocent. You pay your bail and you get to to just do anything. You got to go away. In his case, he does go away, meaning he escapes. You pay your bail and then you escape before being sent to prison. He's out and about for about years, and finally he is arrested and jailed. In October of 1934, he gets deported back to Italy. And eventually he is released and he goes to Brazil, where he ends up in a hospital where he dies. So this kind of trick, you borrow money from Bob to give it to Mary. This kind of trick becomes known as a Ponzi scheme. It's very common in the financial world. Sometimes I look at the stock market and it's hard not to think that that's all it is. The 2008 financial crisis, the bubble in real estate prices has much in common with this process, in that you keep, say, you borrow money to buy a house, and then you borrow more money to buy another house, and then you rent these properties, and you hope that you're going to have enough renters. And if you have enough renters, then eventually you're going to get rich, because all these houses that seem to be liabilities because you owe the money become revenue streams. They become assets. Money is coming in. And because money is coming in and you've basically discovered a way to make money, a money machine. Every house is a money machine. Then people say, hey, I want a money machine too. So they start buying houses. And everybody's buying houses and renting houses and getting rich off of their houses, saying, well, I've got 4 houses, I got 5 houses, I've got 20 renters, I got 25 renters. And you keep doing that until eventually people are buying houses, but they're not finding the renters. When that happens, the Ponzi scheme collapses and you're out of business. People have lost a lot of money in Ponzi schemes. For example, on the internet, there was a company called Fortuna Alliance that promised investors monthly returns as high as $5,000. Thousands of people bought into this, people from many dozens of countries, and they lost a lot of money. So eventually it was shut down by the FTC. A well-known story about these kinds of Ponzi schemes is the case of Bernie Madoff, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. Bernard Madoff, was a former chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange. NASDAQ stock exchange was created to be the first electronic stock market. Can we do our trades electronically rather than meeting with people on a trading floor in person and dealing with paper? NASDAQ, with a Q, stands for the National Association of Securities Dealers Automated Quotations. Starts in 1971. Bernie Madoff is chairman of NASDAQ by 1990, 1991, and again in 1993. Part of what's interesting about this, and it's often not mentioned in stories about Bernie Madoff, is that this means, this alone, that this guy was in charge of the second largest stock market in the world after the New York Stock Exchange, the second largest stock market. Imagine the level of corruption if a guy in charge, or formerly in charge, of the second largest stock market creates a Ponzi scheme just to steal money from people. The NASDAQ in itself is interesting. I don't know if I mentioned, but when there is this dot-com bubble in the 1990s, everybody's rushing to the tech sector to create startup companies to make a lot of money, and people just well, I'm going to make a company that does this. You could do a company about reading books online, and you say, well, you know, print is going to vanish. Everybody's going to be reading online on their laptops. We're going to become millionaires. Delivery service, let's do it online, and we're going to become millionaires. And video games online, you don't buy the video game, you just play it online. We're going to become millionaires. And movies online, why would you go to the store to rent a movie when you're comfortable at home? You know, you're in bed, you just sign up for your movie online, and we're going to become millionaires. We're going to deliver all this content. Why would you have a university with overhead and lighting and custodial workers and swimming pools when we can just deliver classes online? Let's deliver classes online. We're going to become millionaires. That's a bubble. Everybody starts saying that they're going to become millionaires by delivering food to your house, by teaching you math on your computer, by doing everything in some sort of a computer startup. So many of these companies get added to the NASDAQ, and eventually by the year 2000, it's in trouble. So by March 2000, stock market of the NASDAQ has peaked at a value of around 5,000, maybe a little bit over 5,000, and then it crashes. It goes way down. And what's interesting about that crash is that it remains below 5,000 for about 15 years, or until 2015, when once again the NASDAQ goes up to above 5,000. Right now, say a few months ago, it was at maybe 9,700, and now it has collapsed to maybe 7,500. So if you're in NASDAQ and you got in after 2015, you've still made money relative to 2015, but at any point this thing can keep vanishing. So we have this guy, Bernie Madoff, and he was born in 1938 in Queens, New York. He worked as a lifeguard as a young man, and he made money being a lifeguard in 1960, and he used that money to work also on installing water sprinklers for yards. He borrows money from the parents of his wife, and he creates his own company. His company is an investment company. So you go from, what is it, lifeguarding to water sprinklers to investments, showing that any of us can just create a platform for trading. And he calls his company the Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. It's a firm with 3 employees and 1 accountant. And once he's got that firm, they start concocting false investment reports. In other words, if you give them some money, they give you a statement, and the statement says, hey, you're doing pretty good. You've made some money. Somebody else gives them some money and you give them a paper statement. The statement says, hey, your investment is doing well. It's gone up by 10%. You start getting a lot of customers who are willing to give you their money, more and more of their money, so that they get these statements. In the meantime, the guy has become chairman of the NASDAQ. He becomes one of the most respected men in all of Wall Street. And year after year, his company is making money. He takes the money that is given by investors, he puts it in a bank account in a Chase Bank under his own name, and he just doesn't buy anything. He doesn't invest with your money. He just puts it in his own bank account. And year after year, he publishes these reports showing how your profits went up by 9%, 10%, 11%, etc. You're making a lot of money. Rarely, say 4% of the time or less, you're actually allegedly losing money. More than 10,000 people invest with him. They invest millions of dollars. It's tricky to count how much did they invest, By some estimates, it's around 10 million, but of course people want to say that he owes them what he promised them, what's in the statements. If you do it that way, it's, it's 65 billion if he does it that way. Some of the people that invested money with him, for example, are Steven Spielberg, Kevin Bacon, his wife, Kyra Sedgwick. So actors, Hollywood, interesting people get involved. Similarly, as Ponzi had been a marketable, interesting investment opportunity for people who are Italian, because he's Italian, Madoff, being Jewish, attracts a lot of Jewish investors. So this is what's known as an affinity scheme. Hey, why would you spend your money on Wall Street when you can come invest it with me? I'm like family. I'm one of your groups. So the affinity scheme preys on people who are susceptible to finding trust in members of their own social group. By 1999, there's a guy called Harry Markopoulos. He's a financial analyst. He works for a company that sells investments. And as part of his job, in order to make money for his company, it becomes a task. Can he figure out how Bernie Madoff is doing? Because if Bernie Madoff has these great reports, how can we copy what he's doing so that our company also get these great returns? He sits down, starts analyzing these returns, and in a matter of minutes, just looking at these things for minutes and hours, he starts to realize this is unbelievable. How the hell can Bernie Madoff be making so much money in so little time? How can he make such great returns? It's almost as if, how can he know which company is going to go up? If you only knew which company is going to go up, you can always choose them after they've gone up. I'm going to invest in this company because they went up. I'm going to invest in that one because they went up. But how can you guess that? There's thousands of companies. How can you know that before you make your investments? Markopoulos realizes that this isn't plausible, that this can't be happening. So he goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission. He tells them, I think it's mathematically impossible to get the kind of returns that Bernie Madoff is generating. So I think this is a fraud. He does that in the year 2000. He does it in 2001. He does it again in 2005 and 2007. And Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC, are supposed to regulate this. They're supposed to check up on people. They're supposed to check that the investments you've actually made are real. They're supposed to check that these purchases of stocks that Madoff has allegedly purchased for people have really been executed. And it's not that he took your money and put it in his Chase Manhattan bank account in his own name. Markopoulos finds out that nobody cares. He was ignored by the SEC Boston office in 2000 and 2001. He goes to Megan Choing at the SEC's New York office in 2005 and 2007. He gives more evidence and nobody listened to him. Nobody cares. So he eventually publishes a book titled No One Would Listen. At the same time, it's similar to the situation of 2008 financial crisis, meaning did most people know that it's going on, or was it a big surprise? Did they know it's going on, or is it a big surprise? Well, if you're giving, say, a 12% annual return, that's really pretty good. So you should have a lot of investors. Companies that handle assets should invest with you because you know how to pick winners. However, all the big investment firms did not want to invest with Bernie Madoff. So that suggests that they knew. They knew this was happening, but they did nothing. This is a friend of theirs. This is a colleague, former chairperson of the NASDAQ. So, you know, they treat him decently in company, but they don't give him their money. So you have innocent people like Steven Spielberg giving him money, but the financial analysts don't give him his money. They think, no, that's just a Ponzi scheme. In January 2006, the New York office of the SEC starts analyzing the Bernie Madoff case, but they don't actually investigate. This becomes one of Harry Markopoulos's final complaints. He says, the SEC does not investigate anyone. These people are not investigators. They're not even accountants. How can you deal with accounting fraud if you're not even an accountant? What are they? They're lawyers, he says. A bunch of lawyers that will look at some forms and see that your name and your date of birth are on it, and some numbers are on these things, some permits, but they're not actually analyzing whether you are actually investing these monies or whether you're just stealing money from people. They're just not doing that job. We could compare it to the business of politics. The business of politics, as you may know, is infected by lawyers. Countless many politicians are lawyers. So you get a strange culture where people are more used to looking at paper. They're used to looking at contracts. They're used to looking at the law rather than looking at factories, looking at production, looking at healthcare, looking at investments, looking at business. So as I was saying, how much money did Bernie Madoff make? SEC chairman, Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, Harvey Pitt, estimated the actual net fraud of Bernie Madoff was between 10 and 17 billion. That's if you do not count the interest, the profits that are due to people. If you count the profits, then we're talking in the neighborhood of 65 billion. So, but think about the point. The point again is you have an extremely successful Wall Street guy, former chairman of NASDAQ, who stole $15 billion from investors. That's Bernie Madoff. One man got people to give him $15 billion. Eventually, the stock market crashes in 2008. And when people see that their stocks are losing value, they go to their investment houses and they say, I want to take out my money. And the investment houses always tell you the same thing. Hey, don't be hasty. These are normal corrections. You know, it's just a momentary downturn. Your money's fine. I'm sure the stocks will go up. Let's not be hasty. And you say, I want my money right now. Please don't be hasty. You know, these are long-term investments. I'm sure it's a great opportunity. The market will continue going up. I encourage you to leave this money. This is, you know, this is a momentary thing. Give me my money. So now Madoff is receiving all these requests from people who want their investments to be redeemed into cash. I want my cash. I don't want to lose all my money. I would rather park my money in a bank account while the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones keep crashing. I want my money. Now, Bernie Madoff, trying to retain his good name, he starts giving people their money. He doesn't have enough of it. So he's giving people money, but he's running out of money. He doesn't have enough money. And eventually he can't take it anymore. So this company, which had grown to be a major investment firm in Wall Street, finally he decides to come clean and to admit to his family, to his sons, for example, look, this is just a Ponzi scheme. And he tells them, they're shocked, they're horrified, they didn't know, they were working with him. What do you have, Dad? Well, how much do we have? And the answer is absolutely nothing. We've got absolutely nothing. It's all one big lie. It's basically a giant Ponzi scheme. The sons turn him in. He turns himself in to the authorities. So again, it's not that the SEC found him out. It's not that the police arrived to arrest him. It's that he and his family decided to willfully turn himself in to to just admit what he had done. For 20 years, feeder funds had received hundreds of millions of dollars from Bernie Madoff. And these feeder funds, when they got these commissions from Madoff, were in turn giving clients to Bernie Madoff, so that the clients were giving money to Madoff. Some of these funds and companies were in the US, some of them were in Europe. The guy is finally arrested in New York in 2008. He is put on trial. Several of his employees are put on trial. One of them was Annette Bongiorno, 66-year-old. She had become a multimillionaire by obeying her boss's orders. She got 6 years in jail. Jerome O'Hara, 51-year-old, he worked on the computer programs that the Madoff firm operated to allegedly create these results. He got 2.5 years in prison. Daniel Bonaventure, he was sentenced to 10 years. He was an operations manager for Bernie Madoff. And Bernie himself gets sentenced to 12 years, saying, well, his life expectancy is just 13 years, so let's sentence him to 12 years in prison. USA Today reports 150 years is his sentence. These things vary. How do you actually account for years in a particular prison? Sometimes it's not an actual year, it's a fraction of a year. Sometimes you get years off for good service or for health problems. Just last it's March now, February, last February, the lawyer for Bernie Madoff said Madoff should be released because he has health problems. The guy was born in 1939, so he is 80 or 81, and we should release him. So right now they're analyzing this, whether he's gonna get released or what. The theft is traumatic. It got JP Morgan in trouble. So basically, JP Morgan was holding money for Bernie Madoff, and they had to pay a lot of fines. If you just look up fraud or fines, JP Morgan, reportedly they're fined $35 billion over a 4-year period for holding this this money. There were settlements. Some people were able to get their money back. The government promised to repay some of the money to investors in the order of billions of dollars to 24,000 victims. Some people were so traumatized and stressed by the loss of their money that they took their own lives. One of them was a French aristocrat, a guy called René Thierry Magon de la Villechette. He lost $1.5 billion. He committed suicide. Another bankrupt investor was an army sergeant named William Foxton, committed suicide in 2009. Bernie Madoff's son, Mark, was horrified by what his father had done. And on the second anniversary of the theft, of the finding out that this his dad was a criminal, he hung himself in his apartment in New York. Even in 2017, another investor, a former guy who had put money into this Ponzi scheme, a guy called Charles Murphy, he took his life by jumping off of a 24-story apartment unit. So this is how a Ponzi scheme works. It's an amazing theft. Yeah, I think it's extraordinary how it illustrates the reality of investments, meaning you give your money or your currency, whatever you want to call it, and in exchange for your money, you get a sheet of paper. And the sheet of paper says, you know, you have this investment, your investments are going to go up, but time again, every now and then, people find out my investments are gone. They're just not even there. All right. It's interesting to think also that these are promises. Your dollars are promises that the Treasury will sometime pay back the Federal Reserve for a loan. That's what our money is. It's an IOU. And then you take these IOUs that you have from the Treasury, is this IOU, and you buy an investment, which is you give it to someone else to give you another IOU. And the IOU says your money is safe, it's been invested. And everybody's trading IOUs and hoping that in the end, they're gonna come out ahead. But unfortunately, many people don't. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording or at least the unmuting, and that way we can all talk. Hey, it's raining, it's really nice. So you have a company, the company has a certain worth, which we think has something to do with how many employees it has, the facilities, the machinery, the savings, and that's the real worth of the company. But at the same time, the company issues these paper products called stocks. And then they only make money. The company only makes money the moment they sell the stocks. They sell the stocks. And now the company makes some money. Meanwhile, the stocks then have a life of their own. People start trading and trading and trading and trading and trading, and the stock value goes up and up and up, and the stock value is going up and up and up, and the company feels, wow, I wish I could also make money on that thing. It's going up and up. And they decide, what if we use some of our own money, the cash we made from our sales, to buy back our own stocks? It'll have a positive benefit. One, if we buy $1 billion worth of our stock, supply and demand means that the price of our stock will go up. So just by buying it, it's going to go up. And once it goes up, then we can sell it. So that's not only that, it puts your company in the news, because it sounds then like your company is doing great. Your company is not doing great. Your company is actually not producing anything. For that $1 billion that would spend, instead the company is just making this financial trick to build up its value. And Warren Buffett's, part of his formula for success is he claims that he actually looks at companies. So people look at a stock price and they see it going up or down. And if they see it going down, then they say, hey, IBM is pretty cheap because the stock is cheaper than it was several years ago, much cheaper. And they say, I'm going to buy on IBM. He doesn't do that. He looks at the company. How many employees does he have? How many factories? How many products? What new products are coming up? And he says, what price would he give to that stock if he would give it a higher price than it actually has right now, or than it will have? He thinks that's a good buy. So basically, he's investing because of the company, not because of the stock price. He thinks the companies, but most investors don't do that. We just say, I'm going to give my money to the S&P 500. These are the 500 most successful companies on Wall Street. I'm going to invest in them, and hopefully I'm going to make money. But we're not even thinking, why would we do that? And we say, well, I don't have the time to analyze what are the best companies. So I'm just going to give up an investment manager. They're going to make that decision for me, and they're going to make these stock purchases. One of the characters that shows up in the reading is Carl Icahn. He's someone that I could ask you about in the exam. Carl Icahn is interesting. He's an example of what Michael Hudson calls an activist shareholder. Notice again, it's a euphemism, a shareholder, a shareholder. It's like magic. It's a magic trick. I'm a shareholder. There are shares and I'm holding them, and I'm an activist. Activist is someone who we normally think is a good person. Hey, he's an activist for the whales and for the trees. He's an activist for Bernie Sanders or for some healthcare for all, for some big social thing. That's an activist. That's not what this guy is. He's a predator who tries to destroy companies. So what he'll do is he'll take a company like Apple and buy a bunch of stock. Hudson tells us a story. He buys millions of dollars worth of Apple stock. When he's bought these millions of dollars worth of stock, now he can influence the decisions of the company. And he tells the company, you know, what this company should do to do better business is this company should start buying back some of its stocks because the stock is going up. So the company should buy stocks so that the company can be richer because Apple stocks are going up. And it sounds stupid when I say it, but when he says it, it sounds serious. Like, boy, he's got a point. I mean, Apple stock is going up so much that this guy bought it. Many people bought it. We should buy it too. In other words, why do we have $10 billion in cash? Cash is going to just lose its value. Let's buy stocks. What stocks should we buy? Let's buy our own stocks. So you buy your own stocks, the stock price of Apple goes up because of supply and demand. And now that it went up, Carl Icahn sells all his stocks. And he makes a lot of money. So he says, well, I made $40 million in a day. In other words, I made $40 million in a day because that people who run Apple were so stupid that they bought their own stock. So now I sell my money, the price of stock goes down, and I don't care about Apple. They lost their cash, their stock is now worth less, and I made a lot of money. And they say that's the free market. Well, remember again what I said last class and maybe some classes before, which is money for poor people. It's money for you and me, meaning we want money. Mm-hmm. Banks don't want money, and companies, if they want to be smart like banks, then they become convinced by financial analysts that they shouldn't want money either. And the question is, why not? Well, because of inflation. It's trivial to lose $3 to inflation in a year. But if you have $10 billion and every $100 loses 3%, then you're out a lot of money. That's a ton of money. So the idea is, where are you going to put your money? One possibility is, well, let's build more factories. Another possibility is, let's buy some stocks. So now the company wants to save its profits so they can buy some stocks. And the idea is, let's buy our own stock. So then not only do we have stock, but it makes the price of our company seems to be doing better. So it's a different, normally if a company is doing great, people want to buy it. So you can either make your company do great by selling a lot of computers. Apple can make these great computers that everybody buys, or that makes the stock price go up because everybody says, wow, Apple's got these great products. It's just going up. Another one is we can just buy our own stock and then the price of the stocks goes up. Does that make sense, Christina?
Yeah.
I want to say that the basic answer is yes, that they can. I think some of the Ponzi scheme in a company happens when they issue stocks. Suppose that a company gets an underwriter, that is an investment bank, to issue stock for the company. It's the first time they're making stocks, or it's the third time. It's the third time they're making stock, and you get somebody who overprices the stocks, which is unusual. You get an underwriter that says these stocks are worth 15 billion. And they start selling the stocks, people buy the stocks, and now the money goes to the company. That resembles a Ponzi scheme if it's a false price. Usually what happens is the opposite. Instead of the price being high, when the stocks are released, the price is low. Because this is what the company wants. Suppose the company is Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs says, hey, computer company, I want to do a initial offering. I want to sell stocks for you. So the company says, fine, you can create my stocks. Goldman Sachs just write these documents called stocks. And now that the Goldman Sachs is about to sell them, Goldman Sachs puts a price on it and says, these stocks are worth $10 billion. Do you agree? And the company says, yes, I agree. Now, you know what Goldman Sachs can do? They can just buy it. Okay, I bought it. It's all mine now. Here's your 10 billion. Now that Goldman Sachs has the stock, they sell it. and they start selling it at 15 billion instead of 10. So instantly Goldman Sachs would make 5 billion. So that's why these investment companies that issue the stock are really at a conflict of interest with the company. Because imagine that you're the company, you got 10 billion on day one of the sale, you sold all your stock, and on day two, Goldman Sachs sells it all for 15 billion. You've been cheated out of your money. So this happened to multiple companies in the past few years. The underwriter underwrites, they underprice your company, and then you never see the real profits. You just see a smaller amount. This is the really neat aspect. I mean, I think it's absolutely brilliant. The way you convince people is, suppose I tell you now, if you give me $10 in 3 months, I'm going to give you $15. And now you tell me, well, I can risk $10. I don't need them. And you give me the $10. You know what I'm going to do? In 3 months, I'm going to give you 15. And you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. Now I say, if you give me $40, I'll give you $60 in 3 months. And you go ahead and you know what I do? I give you the $60 again. So now you're going to go tell your friends, you know, there's this guy. I swear, you give him $10, he's going to give you 15. You give him $20, he's going to give you 30. Yeah. And they all start giving me this money. I mean, money starts just coming in. And I can, so long as other people keep coming in, I can keep paying you off, anyone. But when you want to make your money out, I say, do you really want to make your money out? Because you can also leave it here. Leave it with me. And in 3 months, instead of having $60, you're going to have $90. How about you just leave it? You say, okay, fine, I'll leave it. And eventually, instead of buying from me, you just leave your money for 6 months, for a year. And the amazing thing is how quickly he got thousands of people to give him money in just a year and make millions and millions of dollars. Some people made a lot of money. Similarly, with Bernie Madoff, you know what? Some people got rich because of Bernie Madoff. Because in other words, if you give Bernie your money and you convince him to pay you what he owes you, that's it. You made your 10 or your 20%, and some people did make millions and millions of dollars. But he was just giving them money from his bank account. But most people were not asking for their money, so they didn't get it.